Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, Denotra.
Hello.
How are you? We don't have your face yet.
Oh, there I am.
There you are. Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Are you on a laptop or a desktop?
I'm on a laptop because I found out the hard way that my desktop doesn't have a camera nor a microphone.
You know what? If you can turn around and face that window rather than having it behind you, we can see you a little better.
Okay, well, I'm in my office, so
Yeah, you can't, but you know, that's even a little better right there where the
okay,
window, not in the background. Thank you.
okay, you're welcome.
Yeah, I've learned the hard way. And I have, obviously, I have a very helpful daughter who tell me how to conduct Zoom classes because I had to quickly switch over to that in March.
I did too. I didn't do a very good job, but I'm going to have rules this semester about what you can't do during Zoom class.
Hello, Dr. Price.
That's eat dinner. Can't eat dinner. Can't play with your dog. Got to get out the bed.
Yeah.
Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Good, good. Thank you. Yeah. Ms. Vogel, how are you?
Good. This is my fourth Zoom call.
Oh, you beat me. I've had 3. Mr. Dunn.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Oh, blessed. How's everybody?
Pretty good.
Great. And although that says Luanna Redcorn, I'd be darned, that certainly looks like Kimberly Henderson Baird to me.
It is. We had I was set up a Zoom call with a victim. Our tech person did, but it's logging me in as Luann. And so she and I are trying to do it at the same time and it's not working. I'm trying to change my name and log out of her right now. So.
Yeah, let's see. Who do we have there? Now, let's see. Andrea James is on, but she's the blue horse, I think. She is our support. Instead of
No, I've actually got my face here. I think the blue horses are tech support for Zoom.
Quinn.
It's not Quinn, it's probably Brad or Chris.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, there you are up there.
Yes.
Judge Murphy's joining us.
It's Brad.
Hi, Brad. Thank you for your help today.
Hi, Brad. Thank you. We couldn't get along without you all giving us this tech help, I'll tell you. Or at least I couldn't. Mr. Kozart. We meet again.
Hola.
¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien, me too, and that's it. I'm done.
Oh, Judge Murphy.
I'm muted. Good afternoon. How are you?
How are you? Did you have any of my students in any of your hearings yesterday?
I did. I had a whole bunch of them yesterday.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
They're accumulating those hours and some of them are getting a little nervous.
Well, they've been doing well and they've asked good questions. So
good. And Ms. Minifield is joining us with her iPhone, I think. And it's 3 o'clock and we may as well begin. I'm hoping she's joining us right now. I saw her picture briefly. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read this. This statement. We are convening our subcommittee meeting on law enforcement, justice, and accountability. Ms. Minifield, good afternoon. We can't hear you. The first thing I have to do, I'm required to read this statement. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, state of emergency, and Governor Beshear's executive orders regarding social distancing, this meeting is being held via teleconference pursuant to Senate Bill 150 as signed by the governor on March 30, 2020, and Attorney General Opinion 2005, and in accordance with KRS 61826, because it is not feasible to offer a primary physical location for the meeting. That said, I think we can begin. I I do want to say, first of all, to everybody who's on here, you have access to a shared folder. And I'll address that in a little bit more detail in a moment, but I want to say that that shared folder includes some comments from citizens in Lexington and beyond. And we appreciate every comment we get. I want to tell anyone who is viewing this now or may view it later that emails to this subcommittee may be addressed to this address, racialjustice@lexingtonky.gov. And we will try to repeat that several times during this meeting. We want citizen input. We have some agenda items today, and David Cozart and I have agreed that we're just going to volley these back and forth. I'll take a couple, he'll take a couple. Before I even begin the first agenda item, I want to say, let's all keep the end in mind. The end is that we are expected to have a report by mid-August. There's the possibility that we can ask for an extension, but really there's no need not to get right to work and get this done. This is important. A template for our report is coming. We anticipate, but we haven't seen that template, but we anticipate that we will be asked to name a few top priorities. This is not a congressional committee. This is not a legislative committee. We are not going to have weeks of exhaustive testimony. We're not going to be able to delve into this in excruciating detail. We are expected to have a report. So let's keep that end kind of in mind. The other thing I want us to keep in mind are a couple of things. Now, David and I had a meeting earlier today with the chairs of the big commission and the vice chairs of all of these subcommittees. And one thing that was emphasized is that our exploration is about systems, not people. So, Sheriff Witt, we're going to be examining your system, but there is no intended criticism of you. Ms. Baird, the same. We're going to be examining your system, and the same with the county attorney's office, and the same with the courts. But this is about systems, not people. Let's keep that in mind. The other thing I want us to keep in mind is what the mayor said to us at our first meeting. Let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Let's be sure we get a good outcome, but don't work on striving to be perfect. All of that having been said, I do want to go to agenda item number 1, which is focus on law enforcement and discussion of general topics. David and I talked this weekend. We've actually talked several times this weekend and or since our last meeting. And we agreed that while our big topic, our overall topic is law enforcement, justice, and accountability, we have to start somewhere. So we're starting with law enforcement, and the others will be threaded throughout, and we'll be focusing on others later. But for now, it's law enforcement. The agencies that come to mind first are Lexington Police Department, Fayette County Detention Center, and the Fayette County Sheriff. And I'm sure there are other agencies we need to be thinking about. We created a shared Google Drive. You have documents that we have requested before we had a committee meeting, and that with your help, we've also requested. I would like to hear from you now a discussion of each of those agencies. And please be candid. Please be as honest as you can about what you've seen, what you'd like to see. This agenda that you have received is today and Monday. So please don't be in a rush. We're not in a rush today. And I'm going to call on some people. And the first person I want to call on is Sheriff Witt. And I have given her warning that I would do this because in our shared drive, we have a lot of documents. We don't have anything from you, Sheriff Witt. So what do you have? What should we be looking at? And what are some of your concerns?
Judge,
So,
before you get started, Judge, this is Andrea.
yes, where are
Can
you?
we get an approval of the previous meeting minutes before we move forward with this?
Have they been circulated to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, is there, has anybody read them and is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? Okay, any call for the question? Okay, let's vote. All in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, say nay. Okay, thank you, Andrea, for that reminder. The minutes are approved.
Thank you, Judge.
Anything else I should be doing before we get started?
No, that's good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, Sheriff Witt, to you again.
So I'm happy to provide this committee any document that you might want of us. I have gone through the documents. I finally got in to the format that we're using to share documents mid-morning. And so I have pulled all of those documents. I haven't been able to read them, but of course, a lot of the documents from the Lexington Police Department are very familiar to me. We would have some similar documents, maybe not all of the documents, but we would have similar documents. We do not have collective bargaining at the sheriff's office. We do not have a merit board at the sheriff's office. We are a constitutional office, so every 4 years, our citizens have the opportunity to elect a sheriff. Prior to the health pandemic, we were at approximately 91 employees. We have had 4 employees retire through this, so we're in the high 80s right now, looking to hire additional people. We're a fee-based office, so we don't get any funding from Urban County government. So all of our budget is generated by fees for services that we statutorily provide. Because we're an emerged government, we're not the 911 responder, but we do have the same law enforcement authority as the Division of Police. Our certified peace officers get their training, their basic academy training through the Department of Criminal Justice training. Chief Weathers is very gracious and allows a lot of our 40-hour in-service to be done with his staff at the Lexington Police Training Center. That's a brief overview. I'm not exactly sure what you want me to speak about right now, Judge, but if you'll let me know, I can do that. I am familiar with the President's Task Force. I'm sorry.
What documents do you have? What statistics do you keep? And did you do a response to the 21st Century Task Force?
Okay, so speaking to the last thing first, on the 21st Century Task Force, myself and another staff member, once the task force presented its final document, we were invited to come to DC to meet with some members of the task force and other national law enforcement leaders about implementation of the task force. We brought those concepts back and we started implementing some of those. In the first letter that our office received was from the faith leaders. And in our response back to the faith leaders, we talked about the different pillars that is published here in this report. Then in the letter that we received from the NAACP, they referenced this report, of course, as I'm sure you all have read now, and we responded back to that as well. I do have statistics on the diversity of our office. I can probably provide you other statistics that you might want to know. If you want information from our integrity unit, I'm happy to provide that as well.
Do you have written, are those responses to faith leaders and NAACP in writing?
Yes.
And you have those?
Yes, ma'am.
And your statistics on diversity, you can furnish those if you would? Yeah, great. Anybody else want to comment on anything you think it would be helpful to get from the sheriff, since she's right here in front of us, one of us?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you are a constitutional office and you don't have a merit board, do you have a written disciplinary policy?
Yes, we do.
Would you include that as well?
Yes, I can.
LPD also gave us some information about recent disciplinary actions and the reasons why. Although those reasons are slightly vague, it'd be helpful to have something that that's similar to that as well.
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
Sheriff Witt, you mentioned diversity, that you could provide that. Are you talking about the demographics of your current staff? Or are you talking about could you add demographics of the 2019, 2020 of those you've served or have had like served warrants and have at execute warrants against those demographics? Do you have those?
Okay, so David, are you talking about citizen contacts? Or are you talking about actual court documents that we served on behalf of the courts?
I think citizen contacts for certain.
I think citizen contacts might be hard for me to capture because I don't think we capture every demographic like that. We have a lot of citizen contacts because we do a lot of community outreach in which we're not serving a paper. We're merely checking on people. We're merely making relationships with people in the different neighborhoods that we are serving others court documents, but I can certainly look to the possibility of getting demographics on, say, the warrants that we did serve on behalf of the courts and possibly the process. I don't think civil process will have demographics on it, but I think I can probably work with our Division of Community Corrections to get the warrant service data for you.
I think that's what I think that would be helpful.
Okay, be glad to.
I've got a question too, Sheriff. One of the things that we were asking about last meeting was the notion of training and how we train people and how do we select people and what, if any, screening is done on issues of racism or the sensitivity of candidates to deal with minorities in general. And what part of your selection process, screening process deals with that?
So every peace officer applicant in the Commonwealth of Kentucky since 1998 has had to go through professional peace officer standard testing. We do our testing through the Department of Criminal Justice training. So they have to go through, the first thing is the physical fitness test, and there is a psychological assessment. There's a polygraph, and then finally there is a drug screen. Our office then, of course, conducts a background check, does personal interviews and other things of our applicants.
Yeah, but on the issue of sensitivity to matters of race or other minorities, there really isn't any screening that goes to that, is there?
I don't think that there would be direct screening in the psychological, but I would think that the psychological might pick some of that up. I think the psychological has been a really good tool for us. Prior to 1998, sheriff's offices in the Commonwealth did not have to use those suitability testing, but now that we have found that it is really a good tool. It's probably not a perfect tool, but it is a good tool to use.
I think they use, I was talking to one of the professors at EKU, I think they use the MMPI, but I'm not sure the MMPI deals with racism. I think that's an imperfect instrument to try to get at that, I think. That's,
okay.
There's other experts on this panel. But
Dr. Price?
I was going to agree with you, Justice Scorsoni. You need something that specifically measures for racial animus and bias. And so the things that you might be looking for around aggression, around ability to follow rules is not the same thing, because you can score very well on those and still be a person who exhibits high levels of racial animus and bias.
I would welcome any recommendation that either of you or anyone else on this committee or who's listening may have to help us improve our selection process.
Question, how does the questions that are being asked on the polygraph test, how are those chosen? I mean, would it be simple to say, are you racist? Do you like Black people? Do you like white people? I mean, are those type of questions even asked?
I don't have the list of the questions asked because, again, that's done at the Department of Criminal Justice training.
Are those questions able to be retrieved?
I'm happy to ask for you. I actually reached out to the Department of Criminal Justice training after being selected to be on this committee to get some more information very specific about the curriculum, about the academy itself, how this academy in the Commonwealth fares with other academies throughout the United States, and then to also get very specific information about the decertification process. So she was working on it for me, but she hasn't gotten back to me yet, but I'm quite confident that she will.
And will you, and you'll give us any written criteria you have on selection, screening, and training?
I will, Judge. Yes, ma'am.
As well as some of those specific questions Mr. Dunn was asking about, the questions, the actual questions on the polygraph, because we have people on here. I know Melinda Price, I guess, as well as anybody here, and she's an academic and she's done a lot of research. And I'd be willing to bet she can look at some of those questions and tell us what they're designed to elicit.
That would be great. Thank you.
And maybe,
I-
oh, go ahead, Diane.
Just Sheriff Witt, I was wondering, do you have a crime analyst at the sheriff's department? Do y'all employ a crime analyst
We
there?
do not employ a crime analyst. Our role, based on the charter that was adopted so long ago, defines the conservator of peace as the chief of police. So we focus mainly on the things that happen in the courts, the things that happen as a result of courts, that being warrant service, service of emergency protective orders, service of criminal warrants, transportation of inmates who are picked up in other counties and across the nation, domestic violence issues, things like that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Sheriff, do you have any general orders in regards to body worn cameras or response to resistance?
Sure. So relating to response to resistance, yes, we do. Relating to body worn cameras, we have it's an initial policy because we wrote a grant 2 years ago through the Department of Justice asking for body worn cameras. We saw this as a need, as a tool that we wanted to provide for our officers and for our community. And so we were blessed to receive an award to purchase body worn cameras, and we have now made our selection. And so our training and the launch should be finished by October 1. I think it will be done sooner. So now we've pulled our draft policy back off the shelf, if you will, and we're now making it more robust now that we know that this is finally going to be a reality at the Office of Sheriff.
And will you share that draft with us just in its current form?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great.
And do we have any systems set up for the baby mama daddy drama? The way folks can come down and swear out a warrant, and they'll use the child, but it's really that baby daddy mama drama. The father has moved on to maybe a Baywatch beauty, but the mother of the child can come down and just ledge allegations, and then that starts a whole process. That's what I see in the community and the grassroots system that I'm working in, folks with the warrants. And I don't know if that's part of this system. I'm trying to listen and learn, but that's the question I would like answered. That sometimes it looks like you're guilty and you have to prove yourself innocent.
And what specific information would you like to get from her in terms of either policies or statistics or whatever, Ms. Vogel?
Statistics, yes, ma'am.
It may also go to the policy on how you deal, either police or sheriff. It probably crosses both departments, Tana. How you deal with an allegation and how you deal with the call, if in fact, and I think you're probably talking about DV or partner violence in regards to the mother child, father child. So we may be able to get at that by looking at some of the DV or partner violence instances and procedures on those. So do I just make a call and say my wife hit me? And she has, and you take action on that, or vice versa? I think it's probably the real phenomena you're talking about, Tana.
Yes, sir. That's it. Thank you all.
Right. Yeah. The
Can
policy.
I get some clarification? Can I get some clarification from Tana? I'm trying to figure, are you talking about when they go to the courthouse and file for a petition for an EPO? Or are you saying that there's a 911 call and that there's a response to the house? I mean, I guess I need clarification on what you're talking about.
Yes, ma'am. I'm really talking about the filing of the petition. Is that not done in the sheriff's office?
It's done in the domestic violence office.
Okay, so you guys are gonna have to help me, all right?
Okay, yes, ma'am.
I'm trying to get things in the right department so I can speak just.
And I would just share with you that there is a criteria on, when it's accepted or not. You have judges that are on call 24 hours. And obviously there's error, but they're going to err on the side of caution. So I would suggest that you maybe go to the statute to look at, you know, what a court needs to look at before they, I mean, because a court has to approve the petition. It could be a summons or it could be, you know, an EPO that's entered. It's going to be a summons or an EPO, but there is not going to be an arrest by the domestic violence office unless there has been a response by the police department because of some injury of some type. I mean, it's just it's a lot of layers.
Okay, thank you. Thank
If you
for that
email me, I can get you a handbook.
All right, thank you guys.
You're welcome.
I just want to keep things in the right bucket because I just got so much that we do in the community as far as helping folks. And I don't want to get on the wrong page, because what I can say about the sheriff's department and my dealing with them and people in the community, they live up to the word of peace officers, and the civility that they have shown with the work that has been done with the people that I'm engaged with. And I know there's more work to do, but I just got to do one of these.
Thanks,
right
Tana.
now.
I appreciate that.
That handbook would be helpful, though, setting all that out, I think. Now, you know, today we're talking about law enforcement, but as I said, this is all going to bleed into lots of areas. And at some point, we will need that handbook to look at.
I don't know who that was that volunteered to send the handbook, but we do have it in electronic format, so we can send it out to the group.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah, you and then Andrea can upload it to
Okay,
the.
yeah.
Okay, that would be great. Right. Other concerns for the sheriff? Anybody? Well, thank you. I as I said, I wanted to give you a little warning. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, Lexington Police Department. We have a lot of information from the police department. And of course, you know, this is a hot topic. It's all in the news, and it's in the two statements we've gotten from the letter from the NAACP dated early June, and also the Black Faith Leaders statement. And I think Black Faith Leaders made another statement today. And so they address specific things with the police department. And the three items that I thought of that are in the news are, you know, no-knock warrants and chokeholds and body cameras, and the overriding term use of force. We have the use of force policy. Chief, we appreciated getting some things from you, lots of things, and that, as I said, that's very helpful. But everybody else, do you want to weigh in on any thoughts generally about the police department, or about where we need to be looking, or about what more information we need, or about areas on which you want to work? Because, you know, I hope by first of next week, everybody's saying, oh, I want to work on this and make a report to the committee. So anybody?
Judge, are we moving to item 2 on the agenda?
No, this is still about item 1, generally
Gotcha.
the agencies. We've talked
Gotcha.
about the sheriff, now about the police, then we'll talk about the detention center and what other agencies you think we need to talk about.
I have 2 things. Now, we are going to discuss some more things on point number 4, correct? So we don't need to go into anything that's on the discussion for the 4th topic, right?
You talk about anything you want to.
All right. First thing I wanted to ask was, I have a couple. The first is, does Metro keep records of how many times they run tags?
Chief?
So when an officer, and I assume this is kind of the scenario you're talking about, when officers driving around, they have the capability to run a vehicle's tag that is in front of them, whether it's at a stoplight or involved in a collision, or if they're getting ready to make a traffic stop on that. So that database is through the state database, and there's information that comes back. We do not have a way to track to say certain demographics. Is that kind of where you're going or inquiring on?
I am.
Okay. So if I get behind you, Brandon, and I run your tag, it does not tell me that that Brandon Dunn, a male black. It says Brandon Dunn, or the owner of the vehicle, the registered owner of the vehicle. The officer can then query the operator's license and go through that direction. But that's not a data set that is kept that I'm aware of. It's a state database that we have access to. So we would be able to identify who's the owner of the vehicle and then query that, see if there's any warrants or any other information associated with that, if that makes sense.
Chief Maynard, do
Yes, ma'am.
they have to have a criteria before they access that database, or can they just do it randomly whenever they feel like it?
They can do it random. They can drive around all day long and run tags throughout the day or evening, whatever their shift is.
Without having any probable cause that anything is going on, that there's not a expired tag or anything, they're just running it just to be running it?
That is true. They have that option of if they want, as part of being proactive, identifying who's driving around you, who's on the roadways, and then confirming that one of the vehicles not stolen, that there's no wanted subjects with that vehicle, and or if the vehicle has proper registration and titles.
You don't need the
Chief Mayor.
database to, I want to make sure Brandon gets through his, because he had a couple other questions. But I just wanted to clarify, you said the database does not keep demographics, that you have access to the information management system at the state level.
Correct.
But the database doesn't have to tell us that Brandon's Black. I know that, but it won't, you run it and then you have to run the license plate or the light operator's license for demographics. Is that what you said?
Correct. The registration of the vehicle, it does not keep this individual, whatever their race is, that's the owner of the vehicle. It does not classify that at all.
Does it identify how many times an officer uses the database so that we could like maybe bounce that against how many citations he's written based on that information he got from the database?
That I'm not sure. Again, it's a state database, so I'm not sure that's not data that I've ever inquired about. We can ask.
Could you ask then? Could you ask and let us know, just as a committee, even if you just email everybody, and also any documents that go along with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Sister Queen, you're raising your hand. I want to make sure, is it to Brandon's question there?
It is, yes, sir.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
It's just a follow-up that's kind of off of that to Chief Maynard, is that I wanted to ask, is there a differentiation in the department between, things that are very narrowly focused to an officer's normal course of activity during a day versus data that is collected, that is department-wide, like if we're asking for particular specific data related to an officer's, course of the day, the times that he runs tags or does that type of specific information, does the department keep that on each individual officer? Like, what they're doing during the course of the day, how many, what type of specific activities they're engaged in, what types of vehicles or stops or courtesy calls, those types of things on individual officers?
So the data that we can run, if a lot of the data that we keep has to be associated with either arrest or a citation. And the typical beat officer throughout the day, we know how many calls for service that they go on, whether it's self-initiated or if it's a dispatch call. So if there's a busy day that he or she officer responds to, then they may not have opportunity to make a traffic stop that day. Whereas the next day, there may be not that many calls for service, so then they can be proactive and go out and do some traffic stops. So that data is available that we can look at, but there has to be some sort of action taken, whether it's a citation, a warning notice, whether it's a calls for service, whether it's a report made. Those things we have data on because there's an action that's been taken, if that makes sense.
Can I ask Mr. Dunn a follow-up? Mr. Dunn?
Yes, ma'am.
Talking about when the police pull over somebody for not using their indicator or those kinds of things, were you also including that, not just the ones where they're just randomly?
No, I'm looking for the randomly. I feel like it's important information because if a tag is ran, that can show that people are being targeted by the color of their skin. As David Colzart mentioned, you could tell me in a car if I pass you up, there's 3 of us in a car, 3 of us have long hair, 2 of us have hats on, cocked to the side. That could be a means of targeting individuals based on the color of their skin just by simply running tags randomly. I've been pulled over several times based off of, I ran your tags. and then they did find something, but the fact of the matter is why did you run my tags? After you ran my tags, yes, you did find that my registration was suspended, but what prompted you to run my tags? Because I passed you up, so those type of things, I feel like if we want to get down to really finding out truth and having transparency, there has to be some type of record kept to see if individuals are being targeted by the running of tags, which may open up another investigation. Okay, now your tags are expired. Now I have the right to pull you over. Oh, now I smell marijuana. Now I have the chance to go into your car. But it all prompted with a person driving by that is possibly of a certain type of race or based on the color of their skin. So that's what I wanted to see, is just that information based on, are people being targeted based on the color of their skin?
It's completely relevant, and if we can get the insights of that information management system at the state that would have that I think we get at that.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Dunn.
And then I just have one more, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
It's been brought to my attention that some officers have been using pressure or forcing landlords to evict residents based on the thought of illegal activity, and not necessarily a conviction or a charge of criminal activity. I didn't know what type of database that may be into, or if there's records kept on that information that may prove or disprove it to be fact or not. But I wanted to see if someone could look in it and find out information that, or if officers are actually putting pressure on landlords to evict residents based on the thought of criminal activity.
There's a public nuisance that is utilized, and that has to have a certain arrest that goes to there. If you have a certain example, if you want to email me offline or give me something more to dig on that, but my understanding, I think what you're talking about is more the public nuisance, where there's criteria set up through city ordinance that there are opportunities for us to provide information to the landlords, that if there's certain crimes that are occurring, then the landlord can take action against that. Is that what you're?
So it has to be a crime that is actually taking place and not the thought of a crime.
Yes, no, there has to be an actual crime with citations associated with it, and I can send some of that information to you. Melissa, did you have any?
If I could, Mr. Dunn, it depends on what you're stating as far as the pressure for the landlords. I think what Chief Maynard's talking about is the public nuisance ordinance, which requires a certain amount of calls of activity to a residence, and then a landlord can then come to the courthouse to then institute a forcible detainer action. But if there are situations that a landlord believes that the person has broken their lease, because there's provisions in the lease that says that the lease has to maintain a certain enjoyment for its other residents around them, they can come down on their own without the officer. So I'm just want to know which one you're talking about. So it's not necessarily the pressure from the officer that a crime has to be committed or that there's documented information. They can come down and start that process in front of the court. And it's pretty set and standard if there's a violation or breach of the lease of what occurs after that, if that makes sense.
Well, it does. So there wouldn't be any kind of like paperwork or a paper trail that without the public nuisance that a cop has actually kind of put pressure on a landlord to make an eviction. Is there any type of records out there that I could look into, or that is out there that you could kind of look into, see if that is a fact or not, without the public nuisance? Or is that just kind of a little bit broad?
It may be too broad, but I think that what Chief Maynard was asking you to do is kind of, if you have a specific example, then maybe he can look into, because it sounds like you have heard some information. So if you have specific example that Chief Maynard can get and look into, see if that's an activity that's actually being used. with his
Okay.
office.
Can I just add that when it's the landlord that's coming down there, that's the landlord's interpretation of what has been a violation of the lease agreement. So obviously, law enforcement has nothing to do with that. And so that would not be a statistic that we could capture from somebody unless the landlord came down and put in his eviction papers, the police officer said, I want this person out.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And keep
Just
in
like-
mind, Mr. Dunn, that might be something for our housing and gentrification. That we could bleed over into that as well. That it could be a body of their work if there's something going on factually or anecdotally around housing discrepancies or discrimination.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
sir.
can you make a note of that we need to notify the Housing and Gentrification Subcommittee about that situation once it gets clarified? Does that answer your question, Brandon?
It does, and I need to get a little more information also, so I could dig a little deeper, but I'll definitely be in contact with Chief also.
Great.
I do have a question.
Mr. Harris?
It's, back to, I guess, Brandon's first question about running the tags, but not necessarily running the tags, but is there any way, or does the police department keep up with the number of tags ran in certain beats or certain areas of town as opposed to, say, for example, Winburn as opposed to Brandon Crossing? Do they keep up with those statistics?
Again, that's ran through another database, and if it was tracked, it would just be where the home address is. It doesn't have a GPS tracker on the cruiser that says at 1:00 p.m. you ran this tag and we were over here at New Circle in Leestown and this is where it was ran. That data is not kept.
Well, what I'm really thinking about is, years ago, they used to have beats. I'm assuming that they still have certain beats.
We do.
And do you track which officers in which beats are running these tags or writing these citations in these certain beats?
Again, the citations would be easier to pull because that is data that we actually collect. The running the tags is not something that I'm aware of that is kept on that specific information.
Does all that information go through Channel One, or if it's still Channel One?
No, sir. Well, there still is a Channel One, which is our information channel, that if an officer gets on the radio and asks for that, but the MDCs in the vehicle, which is fairly new. I'm not sure when you retired, but the MDCs officers can run that information themselves.
Okay.
And one more thing that just right before this will be the last thing I promise. There is information on how many times the car has been pulled over for, say, no insurance.
As far as the citation itself, yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, and is that a racial demographics that do you have racial demographics on that also?
The racial demographics as far as traffic stops in general, and then we should be able to pull as well as what the citation was for. Now the citation may hit 4 or 5 things, and it won't tell you what the first traffic stop was unless you looked at that individual incident. But there's data that shows here's individuals that were pulled over listed by race as well as what the citations were for.
Okay. And we don't have that in our repository already, do we?
I don't.
We haven't requested that.
That may have been one of the requests, but I don't know that that's been provided. That's a large data set.
Yeah, we know we need that. We do need that.
Yeah.
And I guess you all are working on that, right, Chief?
There are several things that are being worked on. Yes.
Yeah, I know. Thank you. Thank you.
So
Remember, it's the system, not the people.
Yes.
So what I'd like to say about the system is what is not captured. What is not captured is the trauma that people of color, Black people, the races that we're talking about, what is captured. This is what's not captured. I was 1 block away from my home, and to Brandon's question, the police pulled me over, and it was here on 4th Street. I had saved enough money to put a down payment on a 2020 Soul. What the officer said when he flashed me over, I hadn't run a stop sign, and that was my question first. First thing I did was tell my grandson, put his hand on the dash. I put my hand on the steering wheel. This is what's not captured, and I don't know how to capture this. But being a person that lives in this war zone here in the East End. We were 1 block away from home. My grandson kept saying, "What did we do?" I said, "We didn't do anything. Just do what I tell you to do and don't move." So the officer came on my side. He said, "What's your name?" I told him my name. He said, "Can you step out of the vehicle?" And the other officer was on the side of my grandson, who was 11 years old, with his hand on his pistol. And so now my grandson is traumatized. I'm stepping out. And I said, what did you pull me over for? He said, "Well, your tags didn't match your registration." And so I said, "Well, if it ain't matching, you better call Kia Soul, because I just got this car and everything is supposed to be legitimate." But what happened to us, and what I had to tell my grandson, is that we're still going to respect the police, even though we didn't do anything. And the tears in his eyes, who captures that in our community? And over that night, this same officer, as we conducted a survey, had pulled over 8 people, never gave me a ticket, didn't even, I said, "My driver's license is in there." I'm panicking. I said, "My driver's license is in here somewhere." And after just about 10 minutes, he says, "Well, you can go on." He never saw my driver's license, never saw my registration, never saw insurance card, anything. He just said, "Well, you can just get back in your car and go on." Where is that captured? Am I in the wrong bucket this time by bringing this up with Brandon's question? This is what's going on in the East End area that I know of, because it happened to me and my grandson.
You know, I will tell you, we appreciate any anecdotes like that you have. I don't know that it can be captured statistically, but certainly I'm sure Chief would like to hear specifics like that, including names or complaints or whatever you have. So just because it can't be captured statistically, don't shy away from talking about it, as long as we don't get, totally sidetracked on anecdotes, because we want some recommendations here out of this. Thank you.
Can I provide a response real quick on that?
Absolutely.
So anytime there's a traffic stop made, a citation or a warning notice should be provided. We do have rare occurrences where it's an emergency. We pull over someone, they're trying to get to the hospital for some sort of issue, then the officer can clear that with a certain code. But I would suggest that if you have that type of issue or concern, call and talk to a supervisor. Our body worn cameras should be capturing those incidents. We should be able to go back and review those individually. So anytime there's a question regarding whether the traffic stop was legitimate, that supervisor, you can contact the 258-3600, the administrative number, and the supervisor can review those and go over the citation or the traffic stop with you.
Thank you. That's your system. All right. Any other concerns, Diana Queen?
Well, I just wanted to say that I think in the whole area of contacts and what is a quality contact versus what is, is just, stopping the random stopping of someone, that area right there is critically important, for evaluation, and really hard. And I think that is what several folks are speaking to here. And, maybe it would be helpful to understand, how the police department as a whole evaluates or trains trains, I should say, in regard to, how officers discern, and make these these stops and contacts, because that is an incredibly important part, and certainly very, I think, important as you're talking about an area, as Tanya was saying about the East End, or certain areas about demographics of people, that area of contacts. I mean, how do you go about that? How do you know if that officer is making a quality contact through the course of his shift, day after day after day? How is that evaluated?
Is that evaluated, Chief?
It is. It's evaluated with officer performance as well as complaints that come in. So the supervisor that would be reviewing the arrest reports or citations that are provided each night throughout that officer's shift, as well as there's a number of conversations or complaints that come in that heightens the supervisor's awareness of, hey, let me take a look at this a little bit further. So it's that public input that we value, as well as that supervisory review, whether it's the courts or county and Commonwealth Attorney's Office that have concerns about how cases are handled. There's several antennas that go up that have that opportunity to review that. And so that's part of that, having that input that we value, because it's just not within the police department, it's how our partners outside are viewing those interactions and how they see that too. But there's several avenues, and it's a very broad topic, and it's not one that has a lot of data set that you can pull. But it's that conversation and having the partners in our community that bring that up.
Well, you know, one thing we have asked for is formal and informal complaints. And so would this come under the heading of informal complaints if citizens who were pulled over, like she was talking about, made a complaint? Will that be in there?
Yes, and that is one of those that the informal complaints would capture.
Okay, that's good.
I've seen Sister Price with her wanting to comment, then Sister Minifield, Judge Kaufman.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that we don't just relegate what Ms. Fogel said to pure anecdote, in part because of the ways in which statistics are kept. It'll always be an anecdote. And so there's no way to get at it, except that there is. So my question would be, you said that in the officer's review, they look at citations and written reports, but if officers are wearing body cameras and that's being uploaded to a system that cannot be tampered with, at what point does anyone go back and look at their interactions through the video footage of those interactions? And there's a recent report and some training put out by a professor from Stanford who looked at these exact thousands of hours of body camera video for the Oakland Police Department, and found that even when officers were behaving professionally, they were not as courteous. So they didn't violate the rules of professionalism, but they were not as courteous nor as flexible in their willingness to release those drivers when they stopped Black and Latino drivers. So if we have all of this footage of officers engaging with the public, at what point do you begin to use what is a very clear data about officer interaction in how we both assess performance and also assess discipline?
Sure, and that body worn camera is utilized by the supervisors, not only on random audits through our public integrity unit, as well as the supervisors themselves, but on arrest reports. So when we review arrest reports, if there's something that comes up in there, we go back and watch that footage itself.
Dr. Price, you, in an email to me, said you were particularly interested in this area in training and discipline, right? As if I recall correctly.
That's true. And one of the things that I noticed was not, I mean, I may have missed it in the documents we were given, but in the council hearing, I think in June, they mentioned that the area where the council really had the most authority was in the setting the policies and procedures for the Lexington Police Department. But I don't really see that we have an actual handbook, like an employee handbook of the policies and procedures. We have an organizational chart and we have snippets of information, but we don't really have, as I read it, a layout of the disciplinary process in any formal way. I mean, it goes back to how do you decertify, how do you do this? But when the officer, like I'm an employee of the University of Kentucky, when I have trouble or I have questions, I go straight to my employee handbook. So does the department have something like that? And if so, could we be provided with that? Because it would be very interesting to see, there's a very limited area in which who we report to, it seems from that council meeting can make changes. And in that specific area around policies, procedures, and questions of training is where there was the most latitude, but I don't necessarily see the guidance that officers are given in the materials that we have received.
So two things, the LFUCG has an employee handbook that we go by. We also have our general orders, which is online, that you can go to lexingtonky.gov to the police, and several of the documents that I have provided, the disciplinary general order, those are the general orders itself that would reference that.
Let me follow up on one thing I was asking you, Dr. Price. You know, throughout, things are going to occur to us that might need to be included in a report. And it seems to me one of the things you just said had this nugget in it that reviewing the body cameras on an in-depth basis can turn anecdotes into statistics, and that such a review needs to be performed on a regular or perhaps random, I don't know which basis, so that someone with the expertise to do so can analyze the quality of these contacts. Does that sound about what you were?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I wanted to just on Professor Price's statement as well. Chief Maynard, I heard you say that when there's an arrest or a complaint, then the body cam is reviewed. But what I'm hearing Professor Price say is that, well, and I think I heard you also say, Chief Maynard, that maybe when the integrity unit does random checks, I guess when it's time for their performance appraisal or something like that. I don't know when that random check happens, but is that body cam looked at if there's a citizen complaint? When it's not an arrest, when it doesn't result in an arrest or a charge of some type.
Sure, and I'll go back to the public integrity unit has a random audit they do monthly of so many body worn cameras that they pull up to ensure that one of the cameras has been activated and that the officer's actions are correct. You also have the individual officer supervisor that can pull that up, and whether it's a complaint that they're reviewing, whether it's a information from one of our outside partners that has concerns or questions about how something was handled, or it's simply a traffic stop or an arrest report that they read and they want to look further into it. They then can go in and watch that body worn camera. So they are reviewed quite a bit by the supervisors throughout various interactions.
Other comments or questions about what we need to police? Judge Sorsconi?
I know where this is getting the cart before the horse, but down the road, I'm wondering whether maybe an idea to think about is, and to take Ms. Fogel's incident, you know, and then the chief saying you should call the supervisor. I think for most people to navigate the system, to follow up with a complaint or to request a record or something, this is a very daunting task. I wondered if, just like we've got victims advocates for victims of crimes, should we consider down the road an advocate for people that have a complaint and that will help them access the information or talk to the right person? You know, as I would call 911 tapes, after a while get discarded. You know, if you don't request them right away, they may get lost. There may be other things that are discarded. And I'm wondering whether we might help citizens, particularly those who may not be very sophisticated or low income, to navigate the system with some kind of a victim's advocate. That's just a thought, random thought we consider down the road.
Yeah, that's good. Any other?
So my question was, I know we don't necessarily keep statistics on everything that the police is doing throughout their shift, you know, every encounter that they have, unless, of course, it results in an arrest or some sort of citation. But now we understand that there's at least body cam footage that should have been cut on through regardless of the interaction. So that is available, and we should be able to have somebody that is reviewing that and understand that it's randomly reviewed sometimes by the Police Integrity Committee. But my question is, it should be some statistics on how many times an officer pulled their weapon, whether they actually, you know, fired it or not. Is there statistics on that when they pull their firearm?
There are statistics that we capture when a firearm is pointed at an individual, when a firearm is fired, as far as pulling it out and having it at the ready, so to speak, or it may be out of the holster. That is not captured all the time, but it is, if a firearm is pointed at an individual, then documentation has to be placed on that. And when a firearm is utilized, whether it's a shotgun, a pistol, or rifle, anytime one is fired, majority of the time it's putting down an animal, a deer or something after a collision, is what we see, but we document and track all of those.
Do we have those statistics, Chief?
I don't know if we got that with, it's easy.
Will you look at that and give us those?
Absolutely.
Non-lethal usage. You've got taser deployment.
Tanya said that, he put his hand on his holster, but that wouldn't be captured because the gun wasn't actually unholstered or pulled. But it seems like to me there should be some way of even identifying, because that's an intimidation threat. When they put their hands on their gun in the middle of just a random, encounter. If they always, when they encounter a Black person, automatically putting their hand on their weapon, so I think that is something that we need to be capable of figuring out how we address that. I don't know if we put a sensor, on the weapon, and say every time it's touched, we can determine that it's been touched when you encountered a Black person because you have some innate fear. And so, but those are just my concerns, that how many times are we dealing with a weapon in an encounter with a person of color?
So it'd be interesting to, at some juncture, because I feel like it'd be interesting at some juncture to see what our officers are even trained to do in that. What of it is rote memory, what of it is that innate or inherent bias or fear, and what of it is just posture. I know that I've seen officers just lean on their gun to rest or lean on their belt to rest. So, but I do believe there's absolute legitimacy to what Dr. Price appropriately said. It's not anecdote, but is actually things that happen that do leave residual impact with with our youth and with our adults. And so I think that we do keep that in mind, as we move forward. And certainly there's somewhere in the repertoire and battery of training that this needs to be quite clear that this occurs. When I go in my son's room at my house, in his room, which is a rare occasion, but when I come in, I'm going to intimidate him because I need him to understand that I'm still in control of his home, including his room. I'm his father. Officers are not to use those tactics, right? Officers are to be a little more genteel. And so it's not always the case. So I think it's all legitimate, quite frankly.
David, can you, it's 4:00 and we said we were going to stop at 4:30. And I do want to remind that anyone who's watching can send emails at racialjustice@lexingtonky.gov. But can you lead the rest of this meeting and let's talk about where we want to be by Monday and what other agencies we need to talk about?
Jennifer, may I ask one more question?
May I ask Dr. Price, please? Yes,
so
please.
That we have information about body-worn cameras and body-worn camera procedures, but what are our police cruisers equipped with dash cameras? And where's that information? We don't have any information on that, or how it might be used at a later date.
We don't utilize dash cameras.
We don't utilize dash cameras here. Some police departments in Kentucky do, right? But not in Lexington.
Not in
The state,
So
state police has dash cameras.
Huh?
The state police.
State police.
And I know some of the police departments in Eastern Kentucky, they have them as well. So we don't have any of those here in Lexington.
Well, the state police would be in Lexington and they could.
I'm sorry, I meant the Lexington Police Department.
Oh, no.
But I know when they cut on a body cam, when they headed to a call, you get all of the footage, that would be a dash cam camera, because if they're headed to a call, I've looked at hours of it, that they're headed to a scene. So you get their body cam footage that also captures, en route to a call.
What about when they don't activate the body cam? Because, that happens quite frequently, that all of a sudden the body cam wasn't activated because it was an imminent thing.
Well,
but the dash cam.
And the David McAtee thing, there was no body cam in Louisville.
But I think
so a dash cam could possibly, you would have double And I would think that the dash cam should be activated when the car's turned on and not able to be deactivated. I don't know how. Yeah, I'm just wondering why does the Lexington Police Department not have dash cams? Is it the money or what is it?
I would say yes, the financial aspect of trying to outfit over 800 vehicles would probably be a significant consideration.
And I just want to touch on something that Dr. Price and Judge Scorsoni said. During the complaint, and this is about the complaint with the body cam. Is this not true? Because this is what we were told, that even if you file a complaint and after 60 days, because so many complaints come in, the body cam video is like, it disappears unless you ask for it to be preserved. Is that correct?
There's a couple of things you said there. So I'm not clear on your 60-day. What was that referencing, Tanya?
Okay, so there's a complaint filed and it was informal. And what was told was that if you do not request for that video footage to be preserved, then it just goes away after 60 days, even if you're moving into a formal complaint. Is that true or not true?
The supervisor receives an informal complaint. They should go in and flag that as an informal complaint on the body worn camera, which will then restrict it for a certain time period. I'll confirm what that time period is, but I believe it's more than 60 days. What may be referencing is if there's just a normal interaction, no citation, nothing for the court, then the body worn camera is available for 30 days. And after that, then that body worn camera is removed. Say I stop and we have a conversation and that's documented and there's no court action, nothing that's taken further for that, then that body worn camera will go ahead and be removed after 30 days.
So what's the process if somebody wants it to be preserved just because there's going to be a complaint coming? Maybe a citizen complaint. What's the process?
Once that notification is
for
able
asking the police department to preserve a particular officer camera footage?
So we would have to have some form of notification that a complaint was pending or was getting ready to be filed. Once that's noticed, then the supervisor or PIU can go in and flag that body worn camera to remain on the system.
Okay.
And I just want to interject because I'm all about resources. Judge Scorsoni made reference to an advocate and how it's taxing for citizens to navigate the system. There is a citizens advocate office within LFUCG where citizens can complain to that advocate to help them along the way. And just, I'll throw the number out there. It's 859-280-8271.
Thank you, Brianna.
And then can I follow up on something? I know I've been quiet, this is good. So
No,
to
please.
follow up on something, it's really more of kind of a, sort of like Judge Scorsoni said, one of those future policies, because I hear a lot of it referencing body cams. When there is an actual arrest or something that gets it in the court system, it stays much longer, which is how we get them. And if there's 10 officers, there's 10 different body cams and hours of, we're sitting there watching those. A lot of times I would suspect, I don't know the numbers, but I would suspect a lot of times when there's going to get the complaints like Tana said, the issues, whether it's, the way an officer talked or something along those lines, are going to be the ones that fall into this. It only stays for 30 days. And that's really a storage issue. It's not anything else. It's really a storage issue that will be in this much shorter time frame. And so I like the idea of an advocate or something like that could get that. But to capture those, it would probably be somebody sitting there assigned to watch them or whatever, and to flag them as they need be. So that may be a policy that comes in the future, that there is somebody whose job, rather than these random checks, whose job is just to review them, since you have such a short time frame to review or call in a complaint or whatever. It would have to be somebody actually there that's reviewing them and can flag them quicker and sooner to preserve those issues.
Is there a disciplinary action taken against an officer when a body cam is not activated?
That is part of our disciplinary general order, that the failure to activate a body worn camera.
And so is those transparent for the community? But when they don't, when they're disciplined, or is that what we call a low-level discipline that doesn't get transparency to the general public?
It depends on the situation. We have had 4 or 5 officers that have been charged for failing to activate their body worn camera. Sometimes they are with a higher issue that we've addressed. So that is all part of the discipline process that goes in front of council. That's a formal charge that they receive.
Can we do this? Because clearly the body cam rises out. In fact, it was mentioned that the leaders of black leaders of Lexington and vicinity have issued a statement. This is their new statement from today. I will get this to the group, but you will see what I'm sharing with you. They did in fact highlight where there's already documentation where there's growth opportunity and call it challenges with body cam activation. And that is the statement, and the Herald Leader has reported that on June 26th. So that's a growth opportunity. So we need to put a recommendation around this. We need to be actionable around this, and we need the data to support it. And what I hear Chief Maynard saying is he will get us what we need, and then based on the metrics that we are able to unpack there, we're able to build a recommendation around it, and that could include but not be limited to the disciplinary policies at such times that body cams are not activated. Because what that does in practice is it prompts me or my wife or my daughter that's in the car with me when I get pulled over, they're going to start videoing, which could potentially, they're going to video on their phone. Her grandson might have done that had she not said, remain stationary. And with her 11-year-old grandson, out of his trepidation of law enforcement, is videoing this. That now leads to a potential another escalation, because now your officer could be offended or perhaps intimidated by them being filmed by cell phone. And so it's very real, it's very germane. And so let's make sure that we bring that to a place of recommendation. So on the agenda item 1, we have not talked about FCDC, and that will come with its own set of requests, data. We do have some. We have their census. We have their 2020 census. I think it's in the repository now. We will need to revisit that on Monday, I'm assuming. That's why we made this agenda for a 2-day agenda. The second agenda item actually calls for it's some more to do with LPD. I wanted to pause and do a couple of things. One, again, those that are viewing this live on YouTube and or in the future, if you have comments, you can email racialjustice@lexingtonky.gov. Those will be reviewed. They will be shared with the entire group. It does not mean that each will be addressed in this space, but they will be taken into consideration as we continue to plan. Secondly, let's keep in mind, again, we're reverse engineering from the product. We are going to want recommendations. I want to pause and check pulse on this process, pause and check the environment on this process of beginning with LPD, beginning with Sheriff's Office, beginning with the law enforcement component, making sure that that still sounds and feels right. The other piece that when we were talking with to consider as we do this pulse check, the other piece to consider is we ask of the super commission, the larger commission today, what if this subcommittee in fact had things that needed to be done like right now and not wait till the report? We have recommendations that we have come to some reasonable consensus around that need to be done day before yesterday, and they need not wait until this report is fully formulated. could we bring those forward? And we're believing that that is something that is going to be entertained. And so I wanted to share that with this group as we do kind of this pulse check. And I just want to, it's a little off agenda, Judge, but I feel like because there's been a wealth of sharing that I want to make sure that we don't continue down this trajectory of working law enforcement initially without checking the pulse. So give us some feedback here on this current approach and process that is a bit of a deviation from our first meeting.
You know, also the team thing we sort of floated last time. We thought it good for us to keep talking generally, and as we identify areas you want to volunteer in, that will happen naturally. For example, Dr. Price already said she wanted to look at some of the things we talked about, and I hear her talking about, you know, a recommendation on body cameras too. Somebody else may want that. But is there anybody who disagrees with starting with law enforcement first? No. Okay, good. That's good.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted to make sure and honor everybody in that way. I also understand that we we are talking about, as co-chairs of this group, as well as the other groups on the commission. I know accountability is in our title, law enforcement, justice, and accountability. But quite frankly, accountability is a thread that needs to run throughout all of this, because I am not spending this time for naught. And if we're putting out something where there's not going to be any monitoring, we've got to inspect what you expect. And if we expect this to occur, somebody's got to be inspecting it, and somebody's got to be holding our institutions where these systemic racism has occurred. Somebody's got to be holding them accountable. So we have asked the mayor that explicitly. How will this be accountable? How will individuals be held accountable? But I also suggested, as we make recommendations, that we also have the accountability components and how they can be monitored. We have those suggestions as well. So just wanted to make sure that we are advocating for that, and that you knew that we are seeking to value the time of each individual on this committee here. The second agenda item, I actually asked for your response, Chief Maynard, to the 21st century and how the officers, or how the department responded to that. I'm gonna tweak that a little bit, because I want to make sure that we get to that last agenda item and get to next steps for Monday, divvy out any homework or task to be done. So I'm going to ask a couple, if I could, just some general specific questions, or some general questions about the document, which has the 6 pillars. You all may know that those 6 pillars are building trust and legitimacy, police oversight, technology and social media, community policing and crime, training and education, and then officer wellness and safety. Who, Chief Maynard, in the department crafted the responses that you have so graciously given us in written form? Who did those in the department, or what body of people?
Yep. So our planning and analysis section was responsible with gathering. These pillars touched quite a bit of the department. So my understanding is that a number of individuals had helped provide insight or responses to this, but planning analysis was tasked with gathering that. And that was back, I think, in 2016. Similarly, planning analysis is now being asked to go back and review this and update it for 2020. And it'll be the similar fashion. They will be the manager, so to speak, of putting these responses together, but there'll be certain areas that we'll have to supplement. Hey, this is what we have done, or this is what we are working to cover these areas.
Yeah, okay, so that helps me because frankly, and I was trying to get the document so others could, have people seen that and had a chance to review that a bit? In the cache of documents is the LPD evaluation of the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. That would be the name of the document in there. So if you get a chance, perhaps you can look at that. It makes sense. It helps me that it was in 16, because as I reviewed those, Chief, they were pretty, would you say they were pretty general responses to those in 16 initially?
Some of them are, and I think some of them actually go into further detail. Several of the topics were Department of Justice recommendations, and therefore I don't know, would provide much of a response to those, but several of them are more general responses, I guess.
Okay, yeah, so the document is, you guys, is there. So for instance, just starting from the beginning, the first question asked about, oh, I'm sorry, I probably lost it. The first question asked about, and I'll just read it, law enforcement agencies should acknowledge the role of policing in past, present, and injustice and discrimination, and how it is a hurdle to the promotion of community trust. That's under the pillar of building community trust. That's recommendation 1.2. Our response is community trust is essential for successful law enforcement and is top priority of our department. We actively engage our community by attending neighborhood and civic meetings in order to address concerns immediately. Our training academy ensures ongoing instruction of all officers, racial profiling, hate crimes, and it states about a commission since 1993 and the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. You know, and I've had to provide responses to certain things. That was, I won't call it canned, Chief, but it was pretty broad to me. And so do you know when the revision of this will occur?
I know that they've been asked to review it and work on it. That's all the knowledge that I have on that. That was part of one of our community requests that we have received within the last month.
So that was not pro-generated by the department per se. It was an external request to revise the responses to 21st Century Policing.
Yes, sir.
Isn't that in the NAACP letter? That's one of their 5 requests that they, I think that may be where that came from.
Mm-hmm. And who was the person, Chief Maynard, that gave those responses again? Could you repeat that? I didn't catch it.
Our planning and analysis section that does a lot of our policies and procedures, they were tasked with putting this together.
Can you give us the composition of that, and sort of, would that be helpful for us to know the composition of the planning and analysis section of the department? Is that what you said?
Yes, and you want the composition of who all is in that?
I'm just kind of asking the body if that would be beneficial. I'm thinking out loud at this point, which is dangerous. So beware.
One of the things that I was thinking of, because that stuck out to me as well, Mr. Cozart, is that, and it relates back to, again, what has been described by Tana Fogel as anecdote, is that the normalization of some of these police interactions on the part of police officers that might require different training is also normalized in the response of Black people and Latino people in their community. So because it is so normalized, people are maybe unlikely to file formal complaints because this is the understood relationship to them between themselves and people in their community and the police. And so when I read that part of the Task Force on 21st Century Policing and the thinness of it, it made me wonder about how the Lexington Police Department actually saw its history, which is not dissimilar from the history of other police departments, with the Black community in a more detailed way, right? So it can't be summed up or changed, that kind of cultural tide with the association with, I saw some other really wonderful things that were happening in your department around community engagement, particularly around engagement with children and mentoring and tutoring of children. But how do you change that cultural tide? And I think that what we're learning right now is that that might need to be a slightly more intentional part of how we think about policing moving forward, because the distrust that people may have for the police department may be seen as unjustified on the part of the police, but we need to find some sort of merger between the two in how we change the cultural tide on both sides.
Thank you, Dr. Price. I appreciate that recognition and corroboration. I would encourage the entire commission to look at that document for a couple of reasons. Not only to scrutinize, but also to frame, because if you look at the 6 pillars and the respective recommendations, they are quite comprehensive and will encapsulate everything that we've talked about today, quite frankly. Now, we don't have to use it verbatim, but it is a nice framework for the law enforcement. And to Dr. Price's point and the suggesting to the planning and analysis department as they reform their responses. For instance, no coincidence, the first pillar is building trust and legitimacy. The first several questions explicitly ask for one of the principles of this commission, and it is acknowledge. Acknowledge those past things, identify where discrimination has occurred, and never really did that occur in the answering of those questions. So I would be interested for perhaps a recommendation to be geared towards, I don't know how long it takes to reform that. It's a pretty lengthy document. It ended up 28 pages. I don't know how long it takes to respond to that, but perhaps one of our recommendations would be to influence a swift response and reform of that document. And that could help us, quite frankly, in a number of ways as a commission and a community. Third agenda item, Judge, let's push to the, let's hit the landing strip here.
David, could I follow up on one thing that Dr. Price said? I would like to explore that notion of normalized behavior at some point. I don't know if it could be done in analyzing training and evaluation or discipline or whatever, but I thought that was an interesting concept you brought up, that normalized behavior just becomes the accepted norm, and it shouldn't.
So thank you, Judge. We're descending here. So third item, please review that. Be prepared to discuss on Monday. Sister James, what's our meeting time Monday? I believe it's
4 o'clock.
4.
Yeah,
okay.
It's 4 o'clock, and do we have another meeting set for the 23rd? We do at 3 o'clock.
We do. Yes.
Okay, so we have the one on Monday at 4, and then we have another one a week from today at 3 o'clock.
So we will begin with agenda. We can begin with FCDC on Monday. So please be brainstorming how that can fold into the conversation we've had thus far. Hopefully we will get some response from LPD on some of those docs and demos that we had asked for, those metrics that we'll ask for, but certainly want folks to come prepared to discuss the particular topic areas that are listed in agenda item 3, and also be prepared, because at one juncture we've been very forthright that we need probably more public defender presence. We're not going to add to the commission, but we are in fact going to have guest speakers. We had toyed with the possibility of them coming on Monday. I think our Monday agenda is not going to afford us that.
I agree, yeah.
And so we will discuss the expertise within the committee. It may be our methodology moving ahead that we dog ear 15 minutes for expert presentation, whether it is within our group or outside of our group, to inform our discussion. we will swiftly be moving from conversation to a living document that will become our recommendations. And we will identify those recommendations that may be able to be birthed out even sooner than the entire document. So please keep those things in mind.
That was going to be my question, because you had noted that there were things that we realized that cannot wait until the end of August or middle of August or whenever our report is due. So things that we probably should address immediately or to get in front of the mayor or council or whoever. So are you saying, should we email you and Judge Kaufman with those things, or should we, how should we, because those things to me are not, they're in these agenda items, but I didn't know how we vote on moving them out and say, okay, start working on these, please.
Good question, Judge Murphy. Let's on Monday be prepared to discuss those. Okay. If you have the inclination to share within the committee between now and then, feel free, but we will use that time with that glossary of topic areas. We can use that time to discuss, are there things that need to be addressed now? Are there recommendations, strong recommendations that we can put out with the metrics to support the need for urgency on them? And so we can discuss that during that time as you talk with your community members, your constituency, your family, as those things arise. So we can talk about that Monday. Is that okay with us?
Andrea has a question.
Sister James?
I just want to make sure everyone's been able to access the drive. If anyone has had any problems, because it looks like you guys are going to be using that. There's a lot of research in there. We'll also be uploading the citizen comments that are coming in. As someone said on the YouTube chat, they'll be making a document of those comments. Those will be uploaded as well. It's been a really active chat. So if you have any problem accessing, please email the chairs, me, Laura, whomever, and we'll make sure you get whatever you need to get access to those documents.
Andrea,
may I ask a question?
Go ahead.
What are we doing about it? Are the chairs going to respond back to the citizen chat? Or, I mean, what exactly are we doing with those comments?
We haven't responded at all. We just want to share them with all of you. And I think we should all take into account all the chats, all the comments. But those people won't necessarily be coming to talk to us or anything. We just need to take that into account as we move forward. That was our thinking.
LFUCG staff assistants are acknowledging emails that are coming in. We have not responded and likely cannot respond to each chat. And quite frankly, you can't respond to all of them when they get hot and popping.
Right.
Now, do we have access to that while we are in live session, Andrea?
It's on the YouTube. So I have my phone going and watching YouTube chats at the same time.
So we would need some simultaneous viewing. So we may take into practice here, Judge, that we have someone that may be delegated to have another screen going if there's something relevant.
I'm not sure I can keep up with both tracks.
Well, and it doesn't have to be everybody. It doesn't have to be everybody, but it actually, if you watch the chats and if you watched our council meeting when chat was live and hot and popping, it just helps remind you of the current environment and the milieu and the ecosystem that we're working within. Sometimes it's very heartening. Sometimes it's very disheartening. Yeah. But it is the truth. And we need to be working from truth, and we need to be working from reality of Lexington, Kentucky, that is a beautiful place with some spots of ugliness, as is life. So it's just reality. So good people, in respect to your time, we're going to end this. We will be back Monday at 4. To be clear, look to FCDC and agenda item 1. Look to agenda item 3 and look to those things that you see rising and bubbling up And as usual, Judge Coffin and myself and our staff assistant are available throughout this. And so thank you for being part of the subcommittee ad hoc family. Sister James, thank you for your air support today. Let's continue to move towards trusted unity as a commission, and let's express that in this community as we move towards racial equity. Bless y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.